Hello everybody, it's Adrian Plus here.
Yes, and Bridget, hello.
So here we are again, and we may be wrong again, but I think this is number 86
It is, yeah.
of Sounding the Shadows. Nothing whatever to do with Sounding the Shadows, I don't think, at the moment, but there
Well, I
we are.
don't know, you say that, but everyone's still a bit stuck. I mean, things are getting better all the time. People can go on holiday and they can not have to... But I mean, lots of people are getting COVID and feeling poorly and not able to go to work and...
So I just can't measure the shallows. I'm no good at it, metaphorically or actually. Anyway, so what have anyone been communicating with us? People always do, don't they?
Well, we had one... she says it's not a joke, but I think it was quite clever. I thought Novak Thingamy wasn't having jabs because his name was Novak.
Novak.
No vaccination.
I never thought about that. Never occurred to me.
You wish you had, really.
No, I'm very pleased that she thought about it. No, that's fine.
I think the other thing she was saying there, which I thought was really interesting, Adrian, was because it reminded me of something that happened to you when you very, very, very first started speaking. Because she was saying that she's had a talk cancelled because she talks and doesn't use illustrations.
Right.
I mean, nowadays that's almost unheard of.
What
but
do you
actually,
mean by
we don't.
illustrations?
I mean, use the screen. You
Oh,
know,
I
use
saw things
all
on the screen,
all the
right, yeah.
stuff. Use PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And that reminded me of when you very first started speaking. Can you remember? Well, I'll tell you. The first thing was they got your name wrong. You hadn't really done anything
They got
at all.
everything wrong.
Well, they called you Mr. Bass instead of Mr. Plus, just for starters.
It was a local, a few miles from where we lived, and it was a meeting of elderly people. Well, the thing funny about elderly people, we are they now. Elderly people who met to have tea. It was something like the Arthur and Mary Tea Club or something like that. I do remember the song ended with "And we shall all be gay," which at that time was still meant something completely different. Yes. Yeah. So I arrived with my 25 minutes of best material locked away in my head and on a piece of paper. And you're quite right. He introduced me, this elderly man, very efficient, said, "And now, Mr. E. Bass."
E. Bass, that's right.
Mr. E. Bass. Much loved local lay reader.
Which you so aren't.
Well,
yes,
first of all, I wasn't a lay reader and never have been.
No.
Secondly, it wasn't that local. It was some miles from where they actually were. As for being much loved, I don't think anybody knew who I was.
But the other thing was, if you remember, Adrian, that you'd just written The Sacred Diary. And he introduced you as saying it was going to be about the secret dairies.
Oh, the Sacred Dairies.
Sacred Dairies.
The Sacred Dairies. Yes, he's going to tell us about the Sacred Dairies. And the reason I was there at all was because another man who was supposed to come and bring slides of the local area wasn't able to come. So nobody knew who I was. The introduction was totally inaccurate. And they glared at me from their tables. Yeah. And I set out and did my 25 minutes, and not a glimmer, not a titter.
No, I know.
And my top lip was sticking to my teeth. It was funny, and one of those funny in retrospect things. But it was
we've seen some amazing PowerPoint presentations, haven't we? But we've also seen some where you just feel they've been put together, by somebody who wants to use a lot of pictures or big chunks of Bible. Yeah. And maybe it's just us. Maybe we just don't particularly respond to that. I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? Everybody has their own things they love.
Well, I think we come from the words end, don't we?
Maybe that's what it is.
We like the words, and we're not either of us any good at art or anything. So maybe it's that. I don't know. I don't really know.
No, I know some people say there's an artist in all of us, but we're in our 70s. We haven't found it in ourselves.
Mine's gone to New Zealand somewhere. Anyway, so I was thinking when we were thinking about today that this week I was told by a friend, and the problem with this is I can't mention names, and I'm not going to. I was told by a friend about somebody who has written a book with a very, very specific view of God's attitude to one particular area of life and death. And when I read one of the essays that this chap had written, I was so horrified I didn't know what to do with myself, because it pictured God as being very cold and cruel and forbidding to people who needed precisely the opposite of that.
So do you mean that it was a sort of anecdotal book he taught to people who had that experience?
Yes, he had.
Well,
and what makes it more difficult, and this has always been the case with church things, I think, and perhaps in the Christian world, is that I think it was very, very well meant, and he felt he had a ministry, he had a mission to warn everybody about avoiding one particular thing which would lead to God being very, very nasty to them. And it got me thinking about how often we've encountered people who somehow wanted to turn Christian living into some kind of exact science so that you could measure it, predict it, work out how you approach God, how God feels about you, and all.
Do you think that's changing, Adrian? I mean, there was a whole period of how-to books, wasn't there? How to pray, how to speak in tongues, how to
be a good Christian woman.
How to be a good Christian woman, which was the book that I was given.
Yeah, it didn't work with you, did
it? No, I don't think it quite had the effect on me.
Well, it didn't turn you into the thing the book was supposed to turn you into anyway.
But I mean,
Thank God.
that specificness, really. I mean, do you think that's changing because of the uncertainty we live in now? Or do you think it's even more that people want to feel certain and to grab on to something that's substantial?
I don't know. I mean, it's all guesswork, really, because I can only know about me and a few other people. But
ask this man.
Exactly.
Knew about a few
you've got
people
to be
who agreed
really
with
careful.
him.
But you're absolutely right. Looking back, I mean, you'll remember some too. I mean, there was a long leg lengthening phase, wasn't there, in the church?
There was. Now I wonder whether anybody listening to this remembers that.
But
there seemed to be a period
they will.
Where many, many, many Christians appeared to have one leg shorter than the other, and miraculously ended up with two legs the same length.
Yeah, and that's
I'm sure
right.
We're going to hear from
I'm sure some people are saying, and that's true. It happened to me
exactly.
But the point I want to make in a minute. I mean, also there was, if you remember, there was a book about praise, and praise was the way. You put all your passion into praise, but because the chap had written one very good book, it was a very good book, and not everybody, lots of people have read it. So then we had another 2 or 3 books on the same subject, because for him he discovered that had helped him enormously. There was obviously the being slain in the spirit thing, where people were
it obviously still happens, but not perhaps to the same extent. And you know of people, we do, for whom that happened, and it was a very, very real, absolutely, totally life-changing experience.
No, that's right. And the point when I thought about this, I thought, first of all of that is kind of fine. I mean, God can do exactly what he likes,
so long as it is him doing it.
If he wants to lengthen some legs or knock people over or encourage people to be involved in praise more, that's absolutely fine. The problem comes, I think, because I think perhaps the appetite for order and certainty among believers, they can give these experiences a kind of significance that they weren't actually meant to have.
Well, it is puzzling that some of them don't appear to be happening anymore. I mean, maybe they are, but I haven't heard anyway about everybody's legs being different lengths, for example.
Bridget, I think that's a very dangerous thing to say, and we're going to hear about a lot of people.
I hope so, because,
No, I mean, I'm sure it happened to some people. Do you remember the time I was in Sweden? I'm sure I've mentioned it before on one of our recordings, where there was a girl with a monkey on her shoulder, and I very flippantly said, God is going to give us all the gift of monkeys, and there was a dead silence as everyone looked at me like baby birds with their mouths open. And I thought, they believed me. Oh, no. And so I said, no, really, I didn't mean it. It was a joke. And then one person laughed and it was all right. But that hope that you're going to be presented with something incontrovertible and important is always there.
As soon as we start talking about something like this, it's problematic, isn't it? Because there is a need to stay open to the unexpected, isn't there? And
absolutely.
The odd.
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't see why God would have monkeys raining down on Sweden. But I mean, my natural
really not
common
see why
sense
that
can't
would be.
quite
They're
see
all
why.
Very odd, I think.
But nonetheless,
Yeah.
you know, there's such a danger, isn't there, that in reaction to that, one decides one's never ever going to be open to anything odd or anything unusual.
I think I would have to say that, in all honesty, I am greedily open to that. What I am not open to anymore, and I confess in the past, I've probably said things and done things that came from me because I wanted them to be important. I know that. But I think now I'm all for it. It's just got. You said it just now. You said it depends where they come from.
Yeah.
I was thinking, by the way, do you know we knew that bloke from way down in the south of England who had a wonderful thing happen to him. He was prayed for, and he really was healed. I think he had a real problem with his head, and after that, he became a sort of evangelist, unofficial evangelist for being prayed for and being where actually, I mean, he had experienced it in a rather strange way, which we won't go into, but and was trying to say to people, if you do this, you also will benefit from it. It's very tempting,
I
isn't
think
it?
a lot of people will have different experiences of that. I remember in a church that we were in so many years ago, but several people, even though they had been baptized and confirmed, they were experiencing being baptized, full immersion baptism, and it meant a lot to them, which was wonderful. And I remember going to some of those baptisms, and then, if you remember, to our horror, it kind of became a rule. It became part of belonging to that church that you had to go through it. And it came out of such a pure desire for people to experience the joy that they had experienced. But you remember our friend who talked about secondhand salvation, and you know that the fact that it was amazing for them, you can't turn it into a certainty for other people into a fact.
No. I remember that song very well, a Secondhand Salvation song. It was very striking. And he was saying exactly that his parents and those who led the church where he was were sure of what they believed, and they said it very clearly. And I think he yearned for a long time to have that, but he couldn't simply pick it up from them because it wasn't his.
No, it wasn't.
He had to have his own experience. And I was thinking today about how we could end up with this idea that you can narrow it down and discipline the whole process like that. Because if you look at the four Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the stuff about Jesus, I mean, most of what he did was always bewilderingly horses for courses, wasn't it? And I can't help feeling the disciples then must have become very bewildered, of course. And they did try occasionally to say, shall we do this like this?
Yeah.
And Jesus always said, no, this is somebody else. This is a different person.
Yeah, that's absolutely
This
right.
is what we do.
The interesting thing about the four Gospels, though, is that there is an extraordinary consistency when it comes to the character of Jesus, isn't there? That doesn't wobble about. He isn't angry and forthright in one Gospel and soppy and, I don't know, he's real. all the way through, all four, which is one of the things I come back to when I'm wobbling. It's a different sort of certainty.
Well, that's a very interesting point. If you said, what did the things he did have in common? I made a little list. Look at my list.
Oh, right, okay.
Very quickly, the money changers, turning the tables over, the woman taken in adultery. I wish she wasn't called that. I was thinking of some other name. The woman with the issue of blood, the Jairus' daughter, the centurion's servant, the Syrophoenician woman, all very, very different and dealt with very differently, and yet so focused and crucially so helpful and
yes,
successful.
So not inconsistent to who he was because of being motivated by passion and by this extraordinary desire to show people in all ways something of the kingdom. Is that right?
The trouble is, though, that applies to a lot of people who get things wrong because they are passionately wanting to be part of it. They passionately want to help. So I was asking myself, and I'm asking you, what was it that all of his work with people and events had in common? I was thinking, we used to say, didn't we, or some people used to say, if you're in a difficult situation and you're a Christian, you say to yourself, what would Jesus do?
Oh yes, absolutely.
But if you tried to use the Gospels as a measure for that, it wouldn't work because he always did something different. And I thought, surely now we should be saying, what is Jesus doing? Not what would he do? And I reckon, thinking about it, that the thing that the only thing I can see apart from what you said, which is a passion and a care and an absolute...
It's the kingdom on earth.
It's the kingdom on earth, was that he always said, I'm doing what I see the Father doing.
Yeah.
He didn't say, I've decided for myself now, I know what I'm going to do, don't need the Father anymore. Right up to the end in Gethsemane, when he asked if he could be let off the final terrible thing, he wanted to know, what is the right thing? What should I do? Should I stay and, like we said last time, cash in on the successes? Should I go to the villages and the towns?
Yeah.
If you start guessing those things, nothing wrong with making bad decisions and being corrected. That's fine.
I'll tell you something that's come into my mind, Adrian, and it wasn't something I think I'd thought of until this moment. But do you remember we were in a very poor little church in South Africa, and it was in Cape Town, and it was a coloured church, which means not that it was a black church or a white church, but that they were people who didn't fit into either category, and they turned out, after apartheid had finished, to be the lowest of the low. And do you remember we went to this...
That's what they told us, wasn't it?
Yeah. And we went to this church service, and people were coming up for prayer. And I don't know if you remember, Adrian, but what was so extraordinary was that there wasn't one mode of prayer. There was a line of people, and as we watched, one person was slain in the spirit. One person fell over completely and was lying on the floor. One person was just having a hug. One person was kneeling very quietly with somebody. And then the next person that came up, something completely different happened.
Yeah, I do remember
and
that.
I thought, that's so good. Do you remember? Yeah. We thought, if it is God who's doing it, then that is the Jesus way. What would Jesus do? Each person was responded to as an individual with no expectation from the crowd or from the leadership as to how to pray. There was no book. I doubt if they had any how-to books there, really.
Yeah, I shouldn't think so. I guess a lot of people that are excluded from church or exclude themselves may well have done that because there was a kind of code, or sometimes there is a kind of code, invisible code, which says you have to buy into the way we do things, otherwise you can't be part of us. And it's not a divine spiritual thing, it's a human thing. And what is always so difficult for Christian groups, and I do understand it completely, is that you want to be able to say to people, this will happen, that will happen. But I have grown more and more wary as the years have gone by. Not I hope not cynical, I don't think I am, but more and more wary about being sure if I am not sure, which sounds terribly naive. But I mean, supposing, what would you say? I mean, if someone said to you, as I'm sure they have at some time, what will happen if I become a Christian?
Oh, I think I'll say ask Adrian. No, seriously.
Well, but it is
I absolutely, well, and it's a valid question in a way. What will be different in my life? For some people, their lives are revolutionised, and for other people, they're still the same old them, but with hope, maybe. I don't know. I don't know what I would say, really. And I mean, only that you're going to meet somebody and they're going to be your friend, and you'll never be as alone again as you are now. I think I could say that, but I don't think I could say what's going to happen to them, because I have no idea, really. I mean, we're not talking about different styles of worship, because I think that's fair enough, that some people love very quiet worship, some people love liturgy, some people hate liturgy and want to be somewhere where they can clap and be happy and wild. That's not what you're saying, is it? I mean, because that's fine to find,
the differences
to find
in
somewhere
flavour
that...
are fine. Yeah. No, I don't know the answer any more than you do.
I'm going to ask you the question.
All right.
What would you say?
Well, I think more and more it seems to me that I can only answer questions like that by saying what's happened to me or to other people I know really well. And in an odd sort of way, the total certainty about who God is and what he does has drifted away. But my trust, I think, in an odd sort of way, has grown. What I want more than anything now is to be allowed every now and then to have a job to do for him. That's what I want.
I know.
That excites me. What frightens me is the appetite that still remains in me to an extent to create or to manufacture situations or words or something that are not really from God. How do you measure that? How do you decide which of those? I wouldn't want to go into that, but
I think if somebody else was saying that to you, you'd say, look, come on, be a bit kinder to yourself. That's the way you're made. That's the way your background has brought you to that point. You know.
Well, that's true.
Whatever personality that person has, and sometimes I think we need to laugh at ourselves a little bit.
Well, I think we've done quite a lot of that.
Yes, I know.
I do. One of the things that is difficult is that there have been times in my life when I feel happy and confident that I have been able to help.
Yeah,
and I wouldn't want to deny that, because are we being negative about the Christian life? Just that it is not a matter of patterns and mantras in what we call ministry. I wish that word could be abolished. And just to accept that God is no more predictable now than he was when Jesus was here. And that is both exciting and, depending on how you're made, alarming. And I can't go very much further than that. But I'd like to know what other people feel about that.
Yeah, so would I.
So, we might hear next week.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye-bye. See you next week.